Why are the brightest minds, the ones who actually built the gears of our world, suddenly choosing to vanish? There is a silent exodus happening right under our noses. The Wall Street architect who mastered the debt cycle just burned his suits and bought a self-sustaining ranch in Wyoming. The marketing genius who spent a decade hacking your dopamine receptors just deleted every digital trace of his existence. These aren't midlife crises. They aren't burnouts. These are people who looked into the abyss of the system, saw the chains we've been taught to call security, and realized the only way to win is to stop playing. What did they see that you're still blind to? What is the terrifying math they finally solved? Welcome to the invisible driver, where there are truths that society doesn't want you to know. This isn't just a few isolated cases of burnout. What we are witnessing is a strategic mass exodus. While the average person is still grinding, hoping for a 3% raise, the people who actually designed the matrix are quietly stepping out of the back door. Take a look at the high-frequency trader who spent 20 years squeezing microseconds of profit out of the market. He didn't retire to a country club. He disappeared to a homestead in rural Idaho, teaching himself how to forge steel and harvest rainwater. Or the lead developer of a major social media platform, the man who literally patented the infinite scroll. He now lives off the grid, far away from any cell tower because he knows exactly what those frequencies are doing to the human brain. The lesson they've learned is one the system spends billions to hide from you. The more you win in their game, the more of your soul you have to trade as collateral. They realize that a corner office is just a gilded cage if you don't own your 9-to-5. So, why did the rules change? To find the answer, we have to look at the cracks in the foundation of the American dream. We have to go back to 1946, the moment your identity was stolen and replaced with a barcode. Picture this. It's 1946. The smoke from World War II is clearing, and millions of American GIs are flooding back home. The factories that spent 4 years churning out tanks and bombers are suddenly silent. The machine is idling, and the men in power are terrified. Why? Because an idle machine is a dead economy. They had a massive problem. How do you keep the assembly lines humming when everyone already has what they need? Before this moment, humans bought things out of necessity. You bought a coat because you were cold. You bought a pair of boots because yours had holes in them. But necessity has a ceiling. Once you're warm and fed, you stop buying. And if you stop buying, the system starves. So, they pivoted. Led by figures like Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, they stopped selling products and started selling emotions. They realized they didn't need to appeal to your logic. They needed to hack your insecurities. They turned the American dream into a competition. Suddenly, you weren't buying a car for transport. You were buying it to prove you were more successful than the man next door. The lesson here is chilling. Your desires were manufactured in a boardroom before you were even born. You aren't choosing your lifestyle. You are fulfilling a quota for a system that requires your constant hunger to survive. But even with all this manufactured desire, there was still a flaw. Things lasted too long. A good hammer could last a lifetime. A sturdy car could last a decade. And that's when they realized that to keep you trapped, they didn't just need to control what you wanted. They needed to control how you paid for it. They needed to ensure you were never truly free, even if you had everything you ever asked for. If the system wanted you to be free, your money would hold its value. But in 1971, the last thread of reality was cut when the US dollar was decoupled from gold. Since that moment, The money in your pocket hasn't been an asset. It's been a depreciating clock. Think about this. In 1970, the average American house cost about $24,000. Today, it's closer to $400,000. Did the wood get better? Did the bricks become magical? No. The house stayed the same, but your labor, the hours of your life you traded for those dollars, became worth less. This is the $100 trillion illusion. The system prints money out of thin air, which devalues your savings and forces you to run faster just to stay in the same place. It's like being on a treadmill where the speed increases by 2% every year, but they tell you you're the one getting slower. This is why you feel exhausted, even if you've done everything right. You aren't failing, you are being drained. The system doesn't want you to save your way to freedom. It wants you to borrow your way into debt. The lesson is brutal. In a world of infinite money printing, the only true currency is your time. And yet, before you even realize your time is being stolen by the banks, they've already locked you into another trap, one that starts the moment you walk into a classroom. They didn't just want your wallet, they wanted to program your mind before you knew how to use it. Ever wonder why the school system feels more like a factory than a place of learning? That's because it was designed to be one. Most people believe education is about enlightenment, but the modern American school system is actually a direct descendant of the 19th century Prussian model. Its primary goal wasn't to produce thinkers or entrepreneurs, it was to produce obedient soldiers and compliant factory workers. Think about the structure. The bells that tell you when to move, the rows of desks, the requirement to ask for permission just to use the bathroom. This isn't learning, it's conditioning. You were trained for 12 years to sit still, follow instructions, and wait for a gold star of approval from an authority figure. They didn't teach you how to handle the inflation we just talked about, or how to build a business. They taught you how to be a good employee, someone who is just smart enough to run the machines but not smart enough to realize they're inside one. The lesson you missed is this. The system doesn't reward the best ideas. It rewards the best followers. By the time you graduate, you aren't a pioneer. You're a cog with a debt-funded diploma, ready to be slotted into a corporate cubicle. And once they have your mind programmed for obedience, they need to place you in a physical environment that keeps you isolated, tired, and dependent. They need to move you into the boxes we call the suburbs, where the walls are thin and the community is non-existent. Once the system has programmed your mind for obedience, it needs a place to store you. Enter the suburbs, the geometry of isolation. After the war, we were sold the dream of a white picket fence and a private yard. But look closer at the design. The suburbs were engineered to dismantle the human community and replace it with a series of boxes. In a real community, you share resources, you talk to neighbors, and you rely on each other. That's dangerous to a consumer economy. Why? Because if you borrow your neighbor's lawnmower, the factory sells one less lawnmower. So, they designed the world to isolate you. They put you in a box where you must own everything yourself, your own tools, your own car, your own entertainment. Think about your daily commute. You drive alone in a metal box to work in a concrete box, only to return to a wooden box to stare at a glowing glass box. This physical isolation isn't an accident. It's a strategy. It makes you lonely. And lonely people are the easiest to manipulate. When you lack a tribe, you fill that void with products. You buy things to feel a sense of belonging that your neighborhood no longer provides. The lesson is this: your house isn't just a home, It's a sensory deprivation chamber designed to keep you focused on your own little kingdom while you ignore the larger theft of your life. And as you sit in that quiet, isolated box, the system begins its final phase of control. It doesn't just wait for you to want things anymore. It goes straight for your biology, hacking your brain's chemistry to ensure that even when you're resting, you're still consuming. You've heard of planned obsolescence, the light bulb that's engineered to burn out after 1,000 hours, the smartphone that starts lagging the moment the new model is announced. But the system's most brilliant invention isn't a broken product, it's a broken you. They've applied the same engineering to your soul. Think about it. Why do you feel a pang of social shame when you pull out a phone with a cracked screen? Why do you feel behind because your car is 5 years old? It's not about the utility. A 5-year-old car gets you to work just as well as a brand new one. The shame exists because they've successfully tied your human worth to the version number of the things you own. The algorithm is the ultimate identity killer. It feeds you a constant stream of other people's highlight reels, meticulously designed to make your actual life feel like a beta version that desperately needs a patch. They need you to feel inadequate, because an inadequate person is a paying customer. A content person is a dead end for the economy. If you were ever satisfied with what you have, the gears of the world would grind to a halt. The lesson is this: your need for the new isn't an instinct, it's a script written by someone else. You aren't upgrading your life. You're just paying a recurring subscription fee for a sense of self that they will intentionally make obsolete by next Tuesday. But here's the part that will really break your heart. You aren't just paying for these upgrades with paper money. You are paying for them with the only thing you can never get more of. Let's do the math on what that new lifestyle is actually costing you in cold, hard lifeblood. Here's the secret the system is terrified you'll discover. You don't buy things with money, you buy them with your life. Let's do the real math, the kind they didn't teach you in that Prussian schoolroom. Take your hourly wage. Now, subtract the taxes. Subtract the cost of the gas to get to work, the insurance for the car you only own to get to that job, and the overpriced coffee you need just to wake up. Subtract the stress tax, the money you spend on takeout because you're too exhausted to cook, and the drinks you buy on Friday night just to forget the week ever happened. What's left? That is your lifeblood rate. For many Americans, a $50 an hour job is actually a $15 an hour reality. Now, look at that new $60,000 truck in the driveway. At $15 an hour, that isn't a vehicle. It's 4,000 hours of your existence. That is 2 full years of your life. 2 years of waking up to an alarm, missing your kids' milestones, and sitting in soul-crushing traffic, just to own a depreciating hunk of metal. The lesson is a punch to the gut. Every time you swipe that credit card, you are performing a voluntary blood transfusion from your soul to the system. You are trading your finite time on this earth for plastic and silicon. The smart ones, the ones walking away, stopped looking at price tags and started looking at the clock. They realized that being rich with no time is just a well-funded funeral. But how do you stop the bleeding without ending up homeless? How do you leave the game without losing everything? It's time to look at the strategic exit, the path chosen by the modern Diogenes. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man in the world, met the philosopher Diogenes, he asked if there was anything he could do for him. Diogenes, who lived in a barrel and owned nothing but a cloak, looked up and said, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." The modern elites who are walking away aren't becoming bums. They are becoming Diogenes with a Wi-Fi connection. They've realized that power isn't about how much you can buy. It's about how little you can be coerced. They are executing what I call the strategic exit. They aren't just quitting their jobs and hoping for the best. They are playing a different game entirely. Some use geographic arbitrage, earning American dollars while living in places where that money has 4 times the local power, effectively buying back 30 years of their life in a single move. Others are building solo biz engines, niche digital assets or automated blogs that generate enough to cover their needs while requiring only a fraction of their time. The lesson is this: freedom isn't expensive. It's the prison that costs a fortune. A man who earns $2,000 a month passively and owns his time is infinitely wealthier than a CEO earning $20,000 who can't even choose when to eat lunch. The exit is about lowering the floor so you can raise the ceiling of your autonomy. But be warned, the system has one final weapon to keep you from walking away. It's the most effective cage ever built because the bars are made of your own fear. It's a psychological pressure cooker designed to make you believe that without the system, you are nothing. Let's look at the final warning before you decide to step off the treadmill for good. The system has one final weapon to keep you from walking away: the psychological leash. It's the voice in your head that whispers, "What about your health insurance? What about your 401k? What will your family think when you aren't a senior vice president anymore?" This isn't a rational concern. It's a programmed fear. In America, we've tied basic human survival to corporate obedience. They made health insurance a job perk so you'd be too terrified to quit. They made retirement a maybe 40 years in the future so you'd keep grinding today. They've convinced you that your identity is your job title, so that if you leave the system, you feel like you've ceased to exist. But look at the reality. Most people play by the rules for 40 years and still end up with less than $100,000 in savings and a body too broken to enjoy it. They traded their youth for a promise that was never meant to be kept. The lesson is this: you aren't afraid of failing. You are afraid of being free. You're afraid of the silence that happens when the noise of the machine stops. Because in that silence, you have to face the person you've become while you were busy being a consumer. The cage is open. It's been open the whole time. The only thing keeping you inside is the belief that the floor will disappear the moment you step out. But the people who walked away found something else. They found that once you stop feeding the monster, it loses its power over you. So, as we reach the end of this road, the question isn't whether the system is rigged. We already know it is. The question is, knowing what you know now, can you still justify staying? The machine needs your participation to survive. But you only need your freedom. The people we talked about, the ones who walked away, they didn't lose the world. They gained the only thing worth having: the steering wheel of their own life. Success isn't about how much you can accumulate. It's about how much you can walk away from without losing yourself. If this video made you stop and look at your own treadmill, then you've already taken the first step toward the exit. Don't let the noise of the system drown out the silence of the truth you just discovered. The choice is yours. Stay in the box or become the master of your own time. If you're ready to stop being a passenger in someone else's economy and start being the driver of your own reality, hit subscribe. Join those of us who chose to see. Welcome to the exit. Welcome to the invisible driver.